I didn't realize my own sister had been quietly planting doubts in my husband's head for months, until the night he asked if I secretly regretted marrying him. What happened after that completely changed how I see my family. My name is Jennifer Williams, I'm 34, and I live in Austin with my husband Daniel Davis. Daniel works as a high school coach, and I'm a clerk at a small office downtown. Daniel and I met years ago during a trip to Nashville. A friend had invited a bunch of people out for a birthday weekend, and Daniel happened to be part of the group. The first thing I remember about him is that he was easy to talk to. Not loud, not trying to impress anyone. Just calm. We spent half that weekend sitting on a patio talking about random things: sports, bad jobs we'd had in our 20s, places we wanted to visit someday. After that trip we stayed in touch. A few months later he visited Austin. Then I visited him again. The relationship just happened naturally. 3 years later we were married. And for 6 years, things were good. Not perfect, but good. Which is why what happened later caught me so off guard. Because the person who slowly started causing problems in my marriage wasn't a coworker or a friend. It was my younger sister, Elizabeth Williams. Elizabeth lives in Phoenix, Arizona, where we both grew up. She works as a salesman, mostly handling property listings and home showings. Growing up, Elizabeth and I had the kind of relationship most sisters probably recognize. We fought over stupid things as teenagers: clothes, music, borrowing each other's stuff without asking. But we still talked about everything. Or at least I thought we did. Looking back now, Elizabeth always had this quiet competitive streak with me. It wasn't obvious. She never yelled or insulted me directly. It was more like small comments. If I mentioned something good happening in my life, she'd respond with something slightly dismissive. If I bought something new, she'd casually explain why she would have picked something better. Little things like that. The kind of comments that are easy to ignore because technically they're not mean. Just sharp. When I got engaged to Daniel, Elizabeth's reaction was strange. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just strangely skeptical. I remember calling her to tell her the news. She paused for a moment, then said, "Already? Are you sure you really know him well enough for that?" Which felt like an odd question considering Daniel and I had been together almost 3 years at that point. I laughed it off and told her yes, I was pretty sure. She didn't push it further, but she kept making comments over the next few months. Things like, "Marriage changes people," or "You never really know someone until you live with them for years." At the time I figured she was just being cautious. Elizabeth had always been more cynical about relationships than I was. Even Daniel noticed it once. After she visited us in Austin during our engagement, Daniel asked me something on the drive home from dinner. He said, "Does your sister actually like me?" I remember laughing. "Yeah," I told him. "That's just how she talks. Don't take it personally." Daniel shrugged it off. And, honestly, so did I. After we got married, Elizabeth still stayed in touch with both of us. She visited Austin a couple of times a year and called me regularly. Sometimes she even texted Daniel directly. Usually harmless things. A funny video. A joke about a sports team. Something random she thought he'd find entertaining. I never thought twice about it. As far as I could tell, they got along fine. If anything, I thought it was nice that my husband and my sister were comfortable enough to talk occasionally. For years, everything felt normal. That's when Daniel started acting different. It wasn't obvious at first. He wasn't angry or distant in some dramatic way. He just seemed quieter, more thoughtful than usual. Sometimes I'd catch him looking like he wanted to say something, but then deciding not to. At first I assumed it was stress from work. Coaching can get intense during the season. But after a while I started noticing small things. He asked more questions than usual about how I felt about our relationship. Not in an accusatory way. Just curious. One night we were sitting on the couch after dinner, half watching TV, when he suddenly muted it and looked at me. The look on his face made my stomach tighten immediately. He said, "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest." That sentence alone made me nervous. I nodded. "Yeah, what's going on?" Daniel hesitated for a second. Then he said something that made my chest feel tight. "Have you been unhappy in our marriage?" For a second I thought I had misheard him. I turned toward him. "What?" He didn't look angry. He looked confused. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He said quietly, "Have you been telling people you regret marrying me?" And just like that, my mind went completely blank. Because I had never said anything like that in my life. Not to friends. Not to family. Not to anyone. I stared at him for a long moment and said, "Where is this coming from?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck the way he does when something is bothering him. Then he said the one name I never expected to hear. Elizabeth mentioned it. My stomach dropped instantly. She said you've been venting to her about feeling trapped in the marriage sometimes. For a few seconds I couldn't even speak. Because I knew immediately that something was very, very wrong. And I had no idea why my own sister would say something like that. For a few seconds after Daniel said my sister's name, I honestly thought there had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Elizabeth and I talked about a lot of things, sure. Work stress, annoying coworkers, random life frustrations. Normal stuff sisters talk about. But I had never once told her I regretted marrying Daniel. Not even close. I looked at him and said, slowly, Daniel, I've never said anything like that. He studied my face carefully, like he was trying to read whether I meant it. I figured, he said after a moment. That's why I asked you directly. That sentence bothered me more than anything, because it meant this conversation hadn't come out of nowhere. Something had been building up in his mind. How long has she been saying this stuff to you? I asked. Daniel hesitated again. Then he said something that made my chest feel tight. Off and on, for a while. A while. I repeated. He nodded. Nothing dramatic, he said. Just little comments. That was when I started to understand. Elizabeth hadn't accused me of anything outright. She'd just been planting ideas. Daniel leaned back against the couch and explained. Apparently Elizabeth had mentioned things casually during text conversations. Stuff like, Jennifer seems stressed lately. Or, I think she puts a lot of pressure on herself to keep everything perfect. At first Daniel didn't think much of it. Sisters talk about each other. That's normal. But then the comments kept happening. Every few weeks she'd say something small. She told me she feels overwhelmed sometimes. Or, I think she worries she settled down too quickly. Nothing extreme. Just enough to slowly create doubt. Listening to him explain it, I felt this strange mixture of anger and confusion. Because none of it was true. Yes, I complain about work sometimes, I told him. Everyone does. That doesn't mean I'm miserable in my marriage. I know, Daniel said quickly. That's why I asked you instead of assuming anything. But even though he said that, I could tell the idea had still gotten into his head. That was the part that hurt the most. The fact that someone had quietly been shaping the way my husband saw our relationship. And that someone was my sister. I grabbed my phone and said, I'm calling her. Daniel looked uncertain. Maybe just talk to her tomorrow, he suggested. But I was already dialing. Elizabeth answered on the third ring. Hey, she said casually. What's up? Her voice sounded completely normal, which somehow made everything feel even more surreal. I took a breath and said, why did you tell Daniel I regret marrying him? There was a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough that I noticed. Then she said, whoa. Where's that coming from? You know exactly where it's coming from, I said. He just told me what you said. Elizabeth sighed like she was dealing with something annoying. Jennifer, I didn't say you regret marrying him. That's not what he said. Well, maybe he misunderstood. That answer immediately set off alarms in my head. Because it sounded like she was already trying to shift the story. I kept my voice calm. What exactly did you say to him then? She hesitated. Then she said, I told him you've seemed stressed about the marriage sometimes. I stared at the wall. Elizabeth, everyone gets stressed sometimes. That doesn't mean I'm secretly miserable. Well, maybe you don't realize how you sound when you talk, she replied. That comment made my stomach twist. What does that mean? You vent about things, she said. You say you feel overwhelmed sometimes. I just thought Daniel deserved to know how you were feeling. That's not what I said, I replied. Elizabeth's tone changed slightly. More defensive now. Jennifer, I'm not trying to start drama. I was just being honest with him. Honest. That word made my jaw tighten. Honest about what? I asked. Things I never said? Another pause. Then she said something that I still remember word for word. You always act like everything in your life is perfect. The comment caught me off guard. What does that have to do with anything? It means maybe you're not being honest with yourself, she replied. That was the moment the conversation stopped feeling like a misunderstanding. It started feeling like something else. Something intentional. Elizabeth, I said slowly, you're creating problems that don't exist. No, I'm pointing out problems you don't want to admit, she replied. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. Like she genuinely believed what she was saying. After a few more minutes of going in circles, I finally ended the call. The entire conversation left me feeling sick. When I put the phone down, Daniel was watching me carefully. Well, he asked. I sat down across from him. She says she was just being honest, I said. Daniel frowned slightly. About what? About things I supposedly told her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that stuck with me. When she first mentioned it months ago, it sounded like she was worried about you. Months. That word hit me like a punch. Months? I repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, nothing huge. Just little comments here and there. That was the moment everything started clicking together in my head. Elizabeth hadn't been trying to destroy my marriage in one dramatic move. She'd been doing it slowly, carefully, like someone planting tiny seeds and waiting for them to grow. And somehow, I had never noticed. After that night, something in our house changed. Daniel and I didn't suddenly start fighting or anything dramatic like that. If anything, we were more careful with each other. But there was this quiet tension sitting in the background. The kind that only exists when a doubt has been planted. Even if you know it's probably not true, once the thought exists, it doesn't completely disappear. A few days after my call with Elizabeth, Daniel and I were having dinner at our kitchen table. Nothing special. Just takeout and the evening news playing quietly in the background. At one point he looked up and said, "You know I believe you, right?" I nodded. I know. And I did believe him. But that didn't mean the situation wasn't uncomfortable. Because the truth was, Elizabeth had managed to create a strange situation between us. Now every normal complaint I made sounded different. If I said work had been stressful that week, Daniel would sometimes pause like he was thinking. Not suspicious. Just careful. And I hated that. I hated that my own sister had put him in that position. A few weeks passed like that. Elizabeth didn't bring up the conversation again, and I didn't call her either. We texted once or twice about family things, but nothing personal. It was the first time in our lives that I had intentionally kept my distance from her. Then one evening Daniel came home from practice and said something that made my stomach tighten again. "Elizabeth texted me today." I looked up from the kitchen counter. "What about?" He pulled out his phone and sat down. "Just checking in," he said. "She asked how things were going." That alone irritated me. Why was she asking my husband about our relationship? "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I said things were fine," he replied. "And?" Daniel hesitated. "She said she was glad to hear that." "That's it?" He nodded, but he still looked uneasy. I could tell there was more. "Daniel," I said, "what else did she say?" He rubbed his forehead the way he does when he's tired. "She said she just worries about you sometimes." My patience was already gone. Why does she think I need worrying about? "That's basically what I told her," he said. Daniel unlocked his phone and slid it across the table toward me. "Just read it." I picked up the phone. The message from Elizabeth wasn't long. But the second I read it, I felt that same cold feeling in my stomach again. It said, "I'm glad things seem good right now. Jennifer just tends to say things she doesn't always mean when she's overwhelmed. I just hope you know she does care about you, even if she struggles to show it sometimes." I read it twice. Then a third time. Each time the same thought kept running through my head. She was being careful. Extremely careful. She wasn't directly accusing me of anything. She was framing it like concern. Like she was trying to help Daniel understand me better. But the message still carried the same implication. That I wasn't fully committed to my marriage. I handed the phone back slowly. "Do you see what she's doing?" I asked. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's planting doubt," I said. Again. He looked back down at the message. For a moment he didn't respond. Then he sighed quietly. "I guess I didn't think about it that way." "That's the point," I replied. "She's not saying anything extreme. She's just making little comments that make you question things." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "You really think she's doing it intentionally?" That question hit me harder than I expected. Because a few weeks earlier, I might have said no. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. "I don't know what she thinks she's doing," I said slowly. "But she needs to stop." Daniel nodded. "I agree with that." Right then he opened the conversation again and started typing a message. I watched him. "What are you saying?" I asked. "Just setting a boundary." A few seconds later, he showed me the screen. The message said, "If Jennifer has a problem with our marriage, she'll talk to me directly. I'd rather not have anyone else commenting on it." Simple. Clear. I felt a wave of relief seeing it. Daniel hit send. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally he said, "I'm sorry this even became a thing." "It's not your fault," I said. And, honestly, it wasn't. Elizabeth had put him in a strange position. If someone's sister says something concerning about their marriage, of course they're going to listen. That's normal. The part that wasn't normal was the way Elizabeth had slowly been building this narrative behind my back. After Daniel sent that message, Elizabeth didn't reply right away. In fact, she didn't reply at all that night. The next morning there was a short response. Just 3 words. "Of course." "Understood." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Nothing. And from that moment forward, she never brought up my marriage to Daniel again. At least, not directly. But by then the damage had already been done. Because once you realize someone close to you is capable of manipulating situations like that, you start looking at every past conversation differently. Every comment. Every concern. Every moment where something suddenly felt slightly uncomfortable without a clear reason. And the more I thought about it, the more one question kept bothering me. Why? Why would my own sister try to do something like this? At first, I told myself maybe she thought she was helping. Maybe she genuinely believed I was unhappy and was trying to warn Daniel. But the more I replayed her words in my head, the less believable that explanation felt. After Daniel sent that message, the situation with Elizabeth mostly stopped. At least on the surface. She didn't text him about our marriage anymore. No more concerned comments, no more little hints about how I supposedly felt. But something between me and her had shifted permanently. Before all of this, Elizabeth had been one of the people I talked to the most. If something happened at work, she'd usually be the first person I called. If Daniel and I had a minor argument, I might vent to her the way sisters sometimes do. After that night, I stopped doing that. Completely. Not in some dramatic announcement. I just quietly stopped sharing things. If she asked how work was going, I'd say fine. If she asked how Daniel was doing, I'd say good. Short answers. Safe answers. Because the idea that she had been taking my words and reshaping them into something else made my skin crawl. A couple months later, Daniel and I drove to Phoenix to visit my parents. It was the first time I'd seen Elizabeth in person since everything happened. I remember feeling strangely nervous pulling into my parents' driveway. Daniel noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just haven't seen her in a while." Inside the house, my mom was in the kitchen cooking like she always does when family visits. My dad was sitting in the living room watching some old baseball game. Everything felt normal. Almost too normal. Then Elizabeth walked in. She smiled when she saw us. "Hey," she said casually. "You made it." No tension. No awkwardness in her voice. Just normal. Which honestly confused me more than if she had been hostile. I hugged her, but the interaction felt different now. Like hugging someone you used to trust. During dinner, she talked about work, complained about the housing market, joked with my dad about something on TV. If anyone had walked into that room, they would have thought we were a completely normal family. But I kept watching her. And the more I watched, the more I realized something strange. Elizabeth was acting like nothing had happened. Not once did she mention the phone call we had. Not once did she acknowledge the things she'd said to Daniel. It was like that entire situation had simply been erased. Later that night, Daniel and I were staying in my old bedroom. I was sitting on the bed scrolling through my phone when Daniel said quietly, "Your sister seems normal." I let out a small laugh. "Yeah, she's very good at that." "What do you mean?" I set my phone down. "I mean she can say something that completely messes with people's lives and then act like it never happened." Daniel thought about that for a moment. "Do you think she knows what she was doing?" That question had been sitting in my mind for months. And I still didn't have a perfect answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks she believes she was helping. And the other part?" I looked toward the closed bedroom door. "The other part thinks she knew exactly what she was doing." Daniel didn't respond right away. Then he said something simple. "Well, it didn't work." He was right. If anything, the whole situation forced us to communicate more honestly than before. We started talking about things more directly. If something bothered one of us, we said it instead of letting it build quietly. Ironically, the thing that could have damaged our marriage ended up strengthening it. But my relationship with Elizabeth never really recovered. These days, we still see each other at family gatherings. We still talk. But there's a distance there now. I don't share personal things with her anymore. And I definitely don't vent to her about my marriage. Because trust, once it breaks like that, doesn't really go back to the way it was. Sometimes I still think about those months before everything came out. About how easily she slipped those comments into conversations with Daniel. How careful she was. How subtle. And the part that still bothers me the most isn't even the lies. It's the intention behind them. Because I still don't know what she actually wanted. Did she think she was protecting Daniel from me? Was she jealous of my marriage? Or did she just want to see if she could create cracks in something that looked stable? I honestly don't know. All I know is this. My husband and I are still together. Our marriage is still calm and steady. But the relationship I thought I had with my sister? That one quietly ended the moment I realized what she had been doing behind my back. And sometimes I still catch myself wondering something. If Daniel had never asked me that question that night, how long would she have kept planning those doubts?